Hundreds of motorcycles lined this street in Toronto's East End, forcing police to close down many surrounding streets.
They aren't just bikers, they're a force. The Hells Angels motorcycle gang isn't just a group. They blend elements of brotherhood, rebellion, and organized crimes. They howl down the streets like fury. They play by their own rules, which makes them a dangerous criminal empire for some, and for others, they are rebels living life on their own. Their way of life challenges both the law and society itself. From their iconic death head patch to their web of connections in the drug trade, the Hells Angels have built an empire that stretches far beyond the open road. And in Canada, they didn't just arrive, they took control. But how was all this possible? And what price was paid? Let's dive into the wild story of how the Hells Angels took over Canada. A thunderous entry taking control of Quebec.
A sweeping police crackdown on organized crime in Quebec has led to more than 30 arrests in the last week, and more are expected.
Imagine Quebec, a province already buzzing with famed biker clubs like Satan's Choice and the Vagabonds. Then, of a sudden, the Hells Angels rolled into town, making their presence known with a blasting rumble. Their first power play? Absorbing Satan's Choice, sending shockwaves through the tight-knit biker community. It was as if the Hells Angels were saying, "You're on our domain now." They flexed their muscles, demonstrating superiority with an air of confidence that came from being part of a global network. Unlike smaller clubs, the Hells Angels had a reputation for ruthlessness, and they weren't afraid to use violence to get what they wanted. The brutal struggle's success over Quebec.
These are charge sheets for some of the people arrested over the last week in this region, almost all of them members of the same street gang.
The war began as the Hells Angels in Quebec began to make a push to establish a monopoly on street-level drug sales in the province in 1993. The Quebec Biker War was a terrain war in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, lasting from 1994 to 2002, between the Quebec branch of the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine. Both gangs engaged in shocking acts of violence, leaving the streets stained in blood. The war left 162 people dead, including civilians. There were also 84 bombings and 130 cases of arson. In March 2002, American journalist Julian Rubinstein wrote about the biker war. Considering how little attention the story has attracted outside Canada, the toll is staggering. 162 dead, scores wounded. The victims include an 11-year-old boy killed by shrapnel from one of the more than 80 bombs planted around the province. Even the New York Mafia in its heyday never produced such carnage, or so terrorized civilians. Finally, the lethargic police responded and woke up launching the project Springtime, leading to hundreds of arrests and announcing that enough is enough. The Rock Machine was nearly wiped out, leaving the Hells Angels sway supreme over Quebec's criminal underworld, expanding the empire.
After a highway procession, this was the final destination for members of the notorious Hells Angels biker gang, which police have linked to drug and human trafficking offenses.
With Quebec under their control, the Hells Angels set their eyes on the rest of Canada. Imagine a chessboard, with the Hells Angels strategizing to take over Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, and the Maritimes. Their methods included intimidation and violence, absorbing rival clubs at a growing rate. To strengthen their power, the Hells Angels employed ruthless tactics that left little room for disagreement. They released an ultimatum to rival motorcycle clubs: join their ranks or face destruction, effectively forcing many to surrender. At the same time, they established smaller puppet clubs, designed to handle the more foul aspects of their operations while allowing the Hells Angels to maintain a low profile and avoid direct surveillance. In the shadows of this empire, the Hells Angels mastered the drug trade, quickly becoming dominant players in Canada's forbidden market. They controlled the flow of cocaine, methamphetamine, ice, and marijuana, ensuring a steady stream of revenue that fueled their expanding influence across the country. Puppet support clubs proven helpful.
Hundreds of Hells Angels and their supporters from across Canada are gathering in Langley.
Hells Angels chapters often oversee smaller motorcycle clubs within their locality, known as support clubs or puppet clubs. These clubs serve as a potential source of recruitment and earnings for the Hells Angels, and, according to law enforcement, carry out crimes on the Hells Angels' behalf in order to shield the Hells Angels from inspection. The Hells Angels also use support clubs to establish an initial presence in an area before forming a full-fledged charter. Support clubs may be established for the sole purpose of providing assistance to the Hells Angels, or begin as independent clubs before coming under the Hells Angels' control. Such clubs may maintain relations with the Hells Angels for protection or to bolster their reputation. Members of puppet clubs attend Hells Angels events and associate with Hells Angels at gatherings. Puppet club members are also permitted to wear a diamond-shaped 81 patch on their vests, which indicates their adherence to the Hells Angels. Major police operations. Was this a full stop?
Do not have a permit from the City of Toronto.
Police say they were there for public safety, not to support the bikers.
As the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club expanded its influence and cemented its power across Canada, law enforcement agencies recognized the urgent need to stop this growing criminal empire. The result was a series of innovative crackdowns, some of the largest in Canadian history, aimed at tearing down the Hells Angels operations and disrupting their grip on the drug trade and organized crime. Project Tandem, 2006, emerged as a key initiative targeting the Hells Angels in Ontario. This extensive operation involved coordinated efforts among multiple law enforcement agencies and resulted in large-level arrests, effectively delivering a severe blow to the club's operations. Project Tandem underscored the police's commitment to combating the widespread influence of organized crime and marked a turning point in their approach to tackling the Hells Angels. Operation Char QC, 2009.
7 known associates of the members of the Hells Angels biker gang are facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder over the 8 years.
A watershed moment in the battle against organized crime in Quebec. In a remarkable show of force, over 150 Hells Angels members were arrested in a single operation. This massive crackdown demonstrated not only the determination of law enforcement to combat the Hells Angels, but also their ability to coordinate efforts across jurisdictions to target the club's extensive network. The massive scale of the arrests sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld and illustrated the significant resources being allocated to fight organized crime. Despite these monumental efforts, the Hells Angels have proven remarkably resilient. Law enforcement's persistent pressure has forced the club to adapt and evolve, cleverly disguising their illicit activities behind a facade of legitimate businesses. This tactic allows them to maintain operations while minimizing scrutiny, highlighting the ongoing cat-and-mouse game between the Hells Angels and law enforcement. The Hells Angels' ability to regroup and reorganize demonstrates the complexity of combating organized crime and raises questions about the long-term effectiveness of law enforcement strategies. As the battle continues, the stakes remain high, with both sides determined to assert their dominance in a world where power and influence are often dictated by the balance of fear and authority. The modern-day Hells Angels, a corporate criminal empire.
So we want to make sure that they aren't targeted so that the public can stay safe, but we also know that the Hells Angels are perpetrators of violence.
The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club has evolved as time has passed, but it still maintains its traditional image and values. It has adapted to the changing times and is involved in various criminal activities. Over the years, the Hells Angels have become increasingly involved in organized crime. Their unlawful activities include narcotics trafficking, specifically the production, transportation, and distribution of methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana. Additionally, the club has been accused of using intimidation and violence to extort money from businesses and individuals. Some chapters have also been linked to prostitution and human trafficking rings, while others have been accused of laundering money through various businesses and financial institutions. In the light of this, many experts believe that the club has evolved into a sophisticated criminal organization. Followed by, in recent years, the Hells Angels have also become more corporate in their approach, using shell companies, trusts, and other financial structures to hide their assets and launder money. This has led some to describe the club as a corporate criminal empire.
Biker gang allegedly poured millions gained from an underground gambling ring into cash, bikes, and even waterfront land. Now,
as law enforcement battles against the Hells Angels, the question still stays. Can they ever be stopped? Every time authorities arrest a leader, new members quickly fill the space, continuing the cycle of violence and crime. Some argue that as long as there is a demand for drugs and organized crime, the Hells Angels or groups like them will always find a way to thrive. Others believe that continued pressure from law enforcement could eventually weaken their grip on power. What will it cost to bring them down? As we ride into the future, one thing is certain. The battle against the Hells Angels is far from over, and their legacy will continue to cast a long shadow over Canada's underworld. Stay vigilant, because in this dark and twisted saga, the next chapter is always just around the corner.